Have you ever wanted to play Torbjorn from Overwatch in Outriders? Well, with this build, you can. Today we're going to talk about the Technomancer class and this build that I used while leveling and have taken it into the endgame with some pretty decent success, especially solo. So let's break it all down. This video is sponsored by you. If you're going to enjoy this video, be sure to hit that big red button and a thumbs up or a thumbs down or both, whatever it may be, and let me know what your Technomancer build is. There's a lot of variety in this class. I'm really interested to see how people are playing it. The primary focus for this build is on blighted rounds and the two turrets, and we're going to have the two turrets up pretty much as possible to take some of that brunt of the damage that goes towards you, and we're also going to be using the Tech Shaman line to give us a little bit more of a tankiness to our class. We've got a little bit more health, and it's just kind of easier to do this, especially in solo play, which is primarily how I play this game, so that you've got two turrets up at all times to take some of that enemy attention away from you, as well as dealing some damage, and then you can use blighted rounds to just clear through enemies. There's also the benefit in the Tech Shaman line from Overclocked, which gives you a chance to come back to life if you do get destroyed on the battlefield. I found this build to be very comfortable throughout leveling and actually completing the story, as well as I've taken it pretty much straight into expeditions and haven't had too much of an issue. I completed the game before I hit level 30 and I just went straight into expeditions with this build and still had pretty good success, so I think it's a pretty decent build that I've come up with for you guys. Let's start off with skills, and the main skill is Blighted Round. So when you use your weapon, you will gain a decay effect which puts on toxic to enemies, and this also targets other enemies close around them as well, so it does a little bit of AoE. It does last until you reload or switch weapons, the same as the other round abilities. And the two turrets being the cryo turret and the blighted turret. The cryo turret does freeze damage and blighted does toxic. Now both of these turrets will be up most of the time, and they do deplete over time, and in most encounters you will have the ability back up before the turret has actually despawned, and it's usually a good idea to just keep popping this and keep moving it as you do move through the battlefield. For your class tree, the main tree we are going to focus on, especially for solo play, is the Tech Shaman for the Overclocked ability that I mentioned earlier, and we will be branching a little bit into the Pestilence line so that we can get the Assault Master node, so we do decent damage with our assault weapon as well. We are focusing on Tech Shaman so that we get a decent amount of heist survivability throughout the game, as well as into expeditions. We don't do a huge amount of damage, but we do enough to keep pushing the expedition tiers, and also these nodes will help us increase our frozen damage so that we can take out enemies a little bit easier. If you're not really worried about survivability, you could go completely into the Pestilence line, as I'm showing on the screen here is a variant that you could use to just focus primarily on toxic damage, and this would mean your blighted turret and using your blighted rounds becomes the primary focus, while you can use your cryo as kind of a stun and an interrupt for some of the AoE effects that you get from that. I've tried both of these, and I primarily am still using the Tech Shaman as it's easier to push through the expedition tiers without focusing highly on your damage. You still get a decent amount of damage with the Tech Shaman, and I can keep pushing my tier up, whereas if I go into the Pestilence line, focus primarily on this, yes, you do a little bit more damage, but you do also take a lot more damage, so it's a bit harder to stay alive in some of those encounters, and you don't get that extra benefit from the extra health and survivability that you get from the Tech Shaman. For your gear, the thing with this game and gear is that it's really hard for me to say this is the gear that you should use, because who knows what kind of rolls you're going to get. But pretty much for any gear that you do get, the stats you want to focus on is firepower, cooldown reduction, and long range damage. This build, we don't need to be in close range. You want to be as far away as possible and deal as much damage as possible. You want to find that happy medium, keeping your distance away and dealing damage. So we're focusing on long range damage. For a weapon, primarily you want to just get anything that's an assault weapon that is automatic. I have been using the Grim Marrow light machine gun with Storm Whip, and it's done the job nicely. You can get this legendary gun from doing the big iron quest that you can do towards the later stages of the game. It is a legendary weapon that you can get from that quest, so it's a good idea to save this quest till the end of the game if you do want to get a legendary weapon out of that quest. There are plenty of different mods that you can use, especially if you're pushing some of the harder endgame content. I would always stress to try and find the balance between offensive and defensive mods, but it is a hard thing to find, and always tinker with it. Mods are really cheap to update on your gear, so tinker with it throughout leveling as well as into the endgame. Some absolute must for this build is Trick Up Your Sleeve while Blight Rounds is active. Killing shots grants 30% extra bullets into your mag. This is really important so that you don't have to use Perpetuum Mobile on your gun, and you can put something like Storm Whip on your weapon to to deal extra damage rather than having to use that mod slot to refresh your ammo in your mag so that you can keep blighted rounds up as long as possible. This is also very similar to toxic lead, which is another option which does pretty much the exact same thing, except for if the enemy is affected by toxic, it refreshes ammo in your mag. You can also get spare mag for blighted rounds, which gives you an extra magazine of blighted rounds, which is really good if you do happen to reload, especially when you're fighting some of the harder enemies and you're struggling to trigger those other mods. This is just a good option just to give you that in your back pocket. If you do need to reload, you've still got that extra mag. Radical therapy is also good to deal 15% more damage to enemies affected by a toxic. Otherwise, I would suggest to just kind of experiment and find what works for you. I was originally considering running the mod which turns your blighted turret into a freeze turret and running 2 freeze turrets, but there is too much benefit for the Technomancer class with toxic, like these mods that you get on your gear. So I ended up not going around that route. You could play with it. I mean, 2 freeze turrets sounds like a good time to me, so I just prefer to have at least that 1 toxic turret so that you have a pretty much guaranteed way of getting these benefits from the toxicness of your weapons. Now let's get into some tips and playing this build. The main focus with the Technomancer class should be on shooting all of the time. You should always be shooting because your class heal is based off how much damage you are dealing. When you deal damage, you gain health. So you want to make sure that you are always shooting your weapon. Even if you don't have blighter rounds active, you want to be shooting and being aggressive as possible in every situation so that you get the benefits from your gun. As I did touch on earlier, you should be popping your turrets as soon as the cooldown is off so that you get the benefits from your overclock to deal an extra 40% weapon damage. This actually does work out to be a lot of damage, especially if you are fighting elite. So if you do have it up, you should be using it. You can check whether you have these buffs active above your health bar. You will be able to see if they are active or not. It's just a good idea to keep glancing at your health bar, see if they're active. If they're not, pop your freeze turret. It doesn't work with your blighted turret, and then away you go. You also want to maximize your blighted rounds uptime, and if you are fighting elites, it can be hard to keep getting that mag refresh to keep your mag topped up. So if you are fighting elites and there's a lot of weaklings around, focus on the ads first before like the elites so that you can keep refreshing your mag, deal a few shots to the elites, then switch back to the other guys, keep refreshing your mag, just so you get that balance and keep your blighted rounds active pretty much at all times. And when you are leveling up through the campaign, really you can just wear whatever gear you like. It doesn't really matter as long as you have mods on your gear that benefit from your build, and you can get some benefits from focusing on the firepower cooldown or long range damage of stats, but really as long as you got a decent armor value and you keep refreshing your mods, you'll be fine throughout the campaign. Also, realistically, you could just lower your world tier down to 1 because it doesn't affect how much experience you get anyway. So you could just lower your world tier, blast through the story, and have a great time anyway. Another tip for this build before I forget is that we aren't running an interrupt. So make sure that if you do need to interrupt an ability from an elite or a boss, that you are within melee range so you can pop a melee. The Technomancer does have one of the best melees in the game because it does freeze everyone around you, which is a really beneficial stun lock. So be sure to do that if you do need to interrupt an ability. And if you are looking for more Outriders content, especially how to clear the endgame, be sure to check out my endgame guide that goes through a lot of different tips and tricks to help you clear through these challenge tiers at a faster rate, as I have struggled with it mightily as a solo player, and hopefully I can give some advice to you to help you get through it. And please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and on Twitch, where I stream 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, Australian night times. Hope to see you guys there in the next stream. Thank you for watching this video. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.